Welcome to the Low Tox Life podcast.
And in the book, I've interviewed entrepreneurs, investors, researchers, because I think it has to be a concerted effort. It can't just be about innovative products, but we have to do the research in order to be able to innovate. We have to fund these things in order to be able to innovate. So I think what the FemTech movement has done so well, and what I'm hoping to do with this book, is to bring people together on women's health.
I'm Alexx Stewart, your host, and Marina Gerner joins me this week on the show to talk about the innovative technologies and headway we're making in research when it comes to women's health. We still live in a world where women's health research is often deemed too complicated and expensive due to hormones, and we often come against it in the boardroom as well when it comes to investment in female supportive technologies because of embarrassment around female body part terminology. Today's guest has literally called her book The Vagina Business. I love that for women. I love that for people who support women. And I hope you love this show because it was born out of Marina pitching an idea for an article to all of the big name papers she writes for around the world that you would know very well, and people calling it too niche. I'm going to leave the story to her to tell. Enjoy the show. Now, one of the things that is dramatically impacting our health and ecology, we know the science around the impact to bird life, to insects, with blue light and artificial light in our cities and regional areas. Block Blue Light can help here. They have a huge range of light bulbs, masks, sleeping lights, portable lights, glasses, track lights. So many options to help you block blue light. Your code is Low Tox Life and your discount is 15% off. It's all the month of July to help you start blocking blue light and noticing the difference that it makes in your home. Hey Marina, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I am great. I'm so thrilled to have you on the show. And as I was saying just before we hit record, I've mentioned the person and the book title I was interviewing on to three different men in my life over the last 2 days. And each time I said The Vagina Business, there was a squirm. Now, these are very progressive, wonderful men who absolutely believe in equality, parity, women's rights, women's safety, women's health advancements. But at the same time, this word has so much of a heavy kind of feel to it and it's like a piece of our anatomy. So can we just start with, how does a finance journalist decide to write a book called The Vagina Business? Because I think that in itself is an interesting story.
Yes, absolutely. And I think you're right. It is such a powerful word, and it's so fascinating to see how strongly people react to it. And I think that's really key to understanding what's going on in the space of vagina-centric innovation. So I am a financial journalist, but I'm quite an unusual financial journalist in that I also write about culture, and I used to write about books and arts. And then I spent a long time at a financial publication. Then I went freelance and started writing about health and technology as well, and AI, because everybody wants to know about these things. And in all of my stories and all of my different interests, I've always focused on women and underrepresented voices. So that's always been something I've been drawn
A
to.
thread.
And then about 5 or 6 years ago, I learned something new, which is, if I ask you or anyone to imagine a person who's having a heart attack, most of us tend to imagine the same kind of person. It tends to be an old white man. And then if I say, what symptoms do you think of? It tends to be pressure on the chest and then pain
Oh yeah,
radiating
can't
down
go
the
like
left
that
hand side.
straight away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And so I found out that those symptoms are typical for men, but they're not typical for women. And I thought that was mind blowing because that's still the image most of us have. And that's still what most of us, think of. It's still what we tend to see in movies. whereas the symptoms of women tend to be considered atypical, and they include things like jaw pain and long-term debilitating fatigue and so on. And as a result of that, we know much less about how to spot heart health issues in women, and women are 50% more likely to be misdiagnosed after having a heart attack. And that's because most of our medical research has focused on the male body historically, right? And as a journalist, I look at businesses and innovative businesses, and I came across a company called Bloomer Tech, and they've created the coolest thing. They've created the smart bra that can help women who are at risk monitor their heart health. And I met the founder, Alicia Chung Rodriguez, at a conference. And I thought, not only have I learned about a new problem, but there are also people who are working on something that could be part of the solution. I need to write about her. I need to tell her story to the world, right? Because that's part of the power that I have as a journalist is I can I can shine a massive spotlight on someone. So I was at this conference. I ran downstairs. I asked for her contact details and she gave me her business card. And I said, I'd love to write about you. And then I contacted all of my editors who I usually write for. And there was just tumbleweed in my inbox. There was this perception that the subject,
Really?
there was this perception that it was a bit of a niche story, which,
For
just
something
something.
that affects how many women get heart attacks? What are the stats there? I
It's the
can't.
number one killer of women in the US and in the UK. We'd have to look up the exact numbers depending on the country.
So you mean to tell me these editors of all these different publications called the number one killer of women in the UK and the US niche?
Exactly. That's unfortunately when it comes to women's health. That is oftentimes the perception. And yeah,
Niche for half the population.
yeah, we're over half the population, and
Yeah,
it's a hugely
exactly.
important
Yeah.
issue. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was shocked by that. But then this was
Wow.
before the pandemic. And then once the pandemic happened, I think we became more aware of sex differences in health because men, when you think back to the start of COVID, men were more affected by it. And I think people realized, oh, yeah, there are differences. Like, let's look into these differences.
So do you mean by that more acutely affected,
Yes,
like
yes,
severe
exactly. The
illness
symptoms
in the
were more,
moment,
yes,
but then women
initially,
had
yes,
the
long-term
longer
COVID.
COVID picture?
Exactly. Nowadays, we know that especially
Mm.
menopausal women, premenopausal women are more likely to be affected by long COVID. But initially, when it was all new, men had worse symptoms. Well, that's just an just a theory.
Mm.
But I think a few things happened, not just COVID, but at that time, a few things happened that drew more awareness to sex differences in health. The book Invisible Women was doing really well too. I think that was another fantastic
Mm.
book that really showed us the gender data gaps in different areas.
Yeah, that
And
was
so that's
pivotal.
right. Exactly. It was
Mm.
pivotal. Um, and that's when I finally managed to publish the story about the smart bra in The Guardian. And the story did really well. And I was invited to chair a panel at one of the first ever FemTech conferences that was happening online. And so it was about period apps, that panel and data security. That was a big topic at the time, and it
I was
continues
going
to
to
be a
ask
big
you
topic.
about that
Yeah,
today. Yes.
yeah. But so through that conference, I was drawn into the space, and I realized, okay, there is a lot of innovation that's going on when it comes to women's health, and I really want to do more research because at the time I was in my early 30s, and I knew I wanted to have children soon. And I
Mm.
also knew that 9 in 10 first time mothers experience a birth injury. And again, that's
Wow.
another mind blowing statistic because it's something that is very well known. Um,
Mm.
and yet there seems to be this attitude of, well, welcome to being a woman and there's no birth without pain, is what a doctor told one of my friends. And so I was thinking, well, there must be people who are part of the solution. And I
Mm.
found another innovative company in California that's working on a device that could potentially help us prevent birth injuries and make birth easier. They're called Materna Medical, and they're creating a dilator. which would basically in the first stage of labor, while the cervix dilates, the device would pre-stretch the muscles of the vaginal canal. And the idea is by the time the baby comes through, those muscles have been stretched, just like you would stretch before a workout, so that you're less likely to experience tearing, and then you're subsequently less likely to experience urinary incontinence, pelvic organ prolapse, and so on. And this device is in clinical trials, so it's not on the market yet. But it seemed to me like something that's very, intuitive and actually quite simple. It's a
Yeah.
dilator. And
Yeah, it
dilators
doesn't
are,
seem,
yeah,
it's not an invasive, it's not even unnatural in a
exactly.
way. Yeah,
Exactly.
it's
It's not
simply
unnatural. It's
helping
not a
the body
drug.
prepare
Yeah. Yeah.
best. Yeah.
Exactly. And I don't know if you saw the illustration in the book. Here it is, dilator, and that's the illustration. And is there anything unusual you see about this illustration? Have you ever seen an illustration like this before?
Do you know what? No, I
Right?
can't. Yeah.
Yeah, many people tell me they haven't seen an illustration like that. And then I think oftentimes when we do see an illustration like this, it's usually this way around. So the woman is usually on her back,
Oh,
right?
got it.
Yeah,
Clever.
yeah, I insisted on her being upright because we know that the position that you give birth in makes a difference to your likelihood of experiencing a birth injury. And also because I wanted to change that mental image of, women always being on their back in a clinical setting and having these kind of invasive procedures and tests done. But initially, I was sent this illustration with the woman being on her back, and I said to my publishing team, no, let's turn her around.
I love that you did that. And it matters, right?
Yeah.
Because what we see is what we can be and what starts to make more sense. And there's
Yeah.
a
And also what's
lot.
normal, right? What's
Yeah,
normal?
that's
Like,
it. Yeah. And I
if that's
think a
the
lot
image
of
we
people,
have, right?
we
And
feel
that's also,
very,
go on.
sorry, I feel like
No, no,
I'm
go on. Yeah,
talking
yeah, yeah.
over
No,
you,
I'm loving
Marina.
it. Go on.
But I feel like we have uh, over medicalized, in a sense, something that we have been doing for a long time. And the real magic is going to happen when we harness the natural way physiology wants to achieve an outcome with all of the incredible protective modern services that we have for women if needed, in the clinical sense. But we don't have to lose all of what is innately the best way to do things. And that's why I just love that you've advocated for that kind of detail, because those little details really matter.
Exactly. And I think in the US, something like 70% of women still give birth on their back. And that's just not necessary, really.
And as we know, I mean, the wonderful Nadine Richardson, who hosts She Births and has clinical trials that she's done around birthing practices to minimize impact to women recovering, minimize need for intervention, like all sorts of incredible stuff. Like, we have the science to know how best to try to do things. And yet we have this stat of 70% of people on their backs. They
Yeah,
probably aren't given options half the time.
exactly. I mean, this is a much bigger topic, but it all comes down to the incentives that exist in the healthcare system, right? And who it focuses on. Does it focus on the interests of the patient, or does it make things easier for providers or more convenient, or, whatever the financial incentives are? So there's a lot going on here, but this is a very kind of basic insight about birth positions, and it's much better to be on all fours, or in an upright position, or in another active birthing position. And that's a matter of education. So I'm not talking about a device here. I'm just talking about a birth position, right? And that's just as important to know.
Did you do a lot of this research when you were
Yes.
pregnant?
Oh yes, a huge
I'm getting
amount.
that vibe. Yeah,
Yes,
that you
yes,
just
yeah.
took it upon yourself to try and
I
know as
did.
much as possible.
Exactly, exactly. And I'm really interested in preventative devices and preventative healthcare, because I think ideally all of our healthcare would be preventative, right? As much as possible.
Of
So
course.
when I researched the space of birth, I realized that the last big innovation in the standard of care of birth was the epidural, which was popularized in the 1950s.
Wow, that's
And
a long time ago.
yeah, exactly.
Mm,
It was invented even earlier in a very iterative way, but it was popularized in the 1950s in the US. And I thought to myself, there's no other area of society or technology where we bring something out that was popularized in the 1950s and we tell people, hey, look, this is the best thing we got. You know, look at this
mm.
cutting edge floppy disk. But unfortunately, in birth, that's
Yeah.
exactly what we do. And why haven't we seen, hundreds of new creations in the space
Mm,
of birth since then? And I think it's because we've normalized female pain, right, on a societal
yeah.
level. And then the other thing I realized as I spoke to founders in the space was something I heard again and again, which is that they struggle to raise money
Mm,
because VC investors are predominantly male. And so they don't want to talk about vaginas in a business setting. And so I have this quote in the book from an investor who says, I don't want to talk about vaginas in my Monday morning partner meeting. And so, in other words, male investors don't want to talk about vaginas in front of other male investors. And as a result, they may not invest in a company that focuses on something like birth injuries. And I was
wow.
very angry to learn that that's one of the reasons, we don't get the innovation that we clearly need and want and deserve.
Mm. And there are so many things to unpack there, right? Like, why is there this VC discrepancy? Why is there a VC funding discrepancy when it comes to female founders versus male
Yes.
founders? Still a huge gap.
Yes.
And so you see then how many layers exist that keep women's health tech, research, all of the above, in its place, so to speak,
Yeah.
which is way, way behind.
Yeah. Exactly. So,
Boy.
so I
Okay.
wrote this story a few years ago for Wired magazine called "We Need to Talk About Investors' Problem with Vaginas," and that story went viral.
Good.
And then,
Good, good.
and then after that, I went all out for the book, and I've interviewed over 100 people across 15 countries, looking at all the innovation that's out there, focused on everything from birth to periods and fertility and menopause, and also going beyond the uterus, because it's important to remember that women's health is not just about reproductive health, but
Mm.
pretty much everything else too, like bone health and heart health.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I want to talk about this because you have some really interesting stats when it comes to research and development around um, erectile dysfunction. And I can't remember off the top of my head what the specific condition comparison was for women. Was it PMS? I think it was.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
There are 5 times more studies into erectile dysfunction than PMS, despite the fact that only 19% of men have erectile dysfunction, while over 90% of women report symptoms of PMS.
We just need to give that some space for a little second because that is frightening.
Yeah.
And we now see, especially with the trend in the US, which has been historically one of the biggest pioneers when it came to women's health research in the 90s, early 2000s, now rolling back some of the grant money for research for women's health. Where is there any country that is continuing the pioneering work? Is there any area in the world where we're seeing parity in men versus women in research around the world, or is it just a disastrous story all round?
Well, so women and people of color were officially included in clinical trials by the FDA in 1993.
Mm,
And there has been more parity in research since then. Um, but it's still, women are still not adequately represented.
hmm
And the other issue is that data is oftentimes still not analyzed and disaggregated by sex.
Hmm.
So even if you've included a more diverse range of people, if you haven't analyzed what that means, then your research may not be as useful.
Hmm.
So that's something else that needs to happen. And we also need to mandate inclusion. Right now, there are no real consequences
Mm.
if you don't include women or if you don't include female mice. And I have this quote in the book from researchers who actually wrote in their research paper, we've excluded female mice because their cages were harder to clean. So they were not too embarrassed to cite that as a reason. Um, and I think publications like Nature have guidelines about inclusion, but then the question is what happens if you don't follow those guidelines.
Mm. Wow. Okay. So again, we're adding another layer of women are too complicated. It's too hard. It's too awkward. I mean, we're still here. It can feel like that feels pretty bleak, I gotta say, Marina. And then I guess I can appreciate that cycles and different hormones and trying to get all the women into the same trajectory of hormone fluctuation at the same particular moment of their cycles, that is harder. But if we don't try and get that research, then we don't improve some of the challenges that, as you said, 90% report PMS. I think endometriosis, it takes an average of 20 doctor's visits or something ridiculous
Yes,
to
eight
get your
years.
diagnosis. Eight
That's right.
years.
Yeah.
Um,
And
this
also,
is,
the consequences will be seen further down the line. We are nearly
yeah.
twice as likely to experience severe side effects from drugs. So,
Mm,
if you don't do the research up front, if you don't make that investment up front, women will pay the price literally later down the line. But there is a hopeful
let's turn to hope.
statistic.
Yes,
Yeah.
let's do it.
So one thing to say is that there's definitely been an upward trend. Inclusion has gotten better.
Hmm.
Um, and in one study by Stacey Geller, they found that 26% of research analyzed their findings by sex. And, that percentage has been going up gradually.
Hmm.
And then another study led by Cassidy Sugimoto found that if the first author and the last author of a paper are female, so in other words, if the two most important scientists on a research paper are female, the chances of it being analyzed by sex are higher. And if you ask, okay, how much more likely is it to be analyzed by sex? The answer is 26 times more likely.
Wow.
Yeah,
And so the message there is women in science.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, women in science, women in senior positions, women in STEM,
Mm.
women in business.
Hmm.
um, and I write about this as having skin in the game,
Yeah.
quite literally skin in the game
Mm.
when it comes to period products and so on. You're just more likely to be aware of the issues and you're more likely to then investigate what might be going on.
Mm. Yeah, wow. And so when it comes to period products, I mean, I remember writing a blog about this maybe 12 years ago when I realized that plastics were able to be used in tampons, that coloring, bleaches, chlorine, GMO, cotton, like you name it, like toxic things could just be added to a tampon and that goes inside you. And we know that those tissues are highly
Yes.
absorbent
Yes.
tissues. And
Yeah.
so,
So I've seen research that says vaginal skin is at least 10 times more absorbent. Some
there you
papers
go.
say, 30, 40 times more absorbent than the skin on your hand.
Hmm. And
And so,
so
So
Let's
what are
talk
we
about
putting inside
that.
our bodies? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So if it is that absorbent, and some drugs are even delivered in that way, then what is it that we're putting into our bodies, and how are these products tested? And usually
Yeah.
they're not tested on vaginal skin or vulvar skin. And so in my research, I found that it's good to avoid any kinds of extras like fragrance, because that can contain a whole cocktail of chemicals. It's good to avoid antibacterial coatings, nanosilver, anything that calls itself odor fighting.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Or
because, yeah,
moisture wicking and all of those sorts of crazy terms. Yeah.
yeah, those things
Mm.
can impact a healthy vaginal microbiome. It's good to avoid any kinds of bells and whistles, anything companies throw in to make products feel more luxurious or high tech, like dyes and letters. And as you've said, some period products are not actually 100% cotton, but only the core of the tampon might be cotton and the rest could be plastic. And if you're using a menstrual cup, clear silicone is the best. So no dyes, no fragrances, no letters. Um, Ideally,
Your
avoid.
silicone cup does not need to be pink, folks. It does
Yeah,
not need to be. There's no reason that thing needs to be pink if that's what you're using.
yeah.
Oh my
And
goodness.
it
Yeah.
shouldn't have any raised lettering on the silicone as well, because bacteria could potentially get stuck in the
Oh, that's a
crevices
good tip.
of these letters.
Excellent.
Yeah, and you don't want growth of bacteria on your menstrual cup because that could lead to toxic shock potentially.
Yeah.
So those are the sorts of things to look out for.
And even with pads and liners, quite often the top coating is made with a hardier kind of plastic polymer woven into the cotton so that it holds better. And then the inside bit is cotton and then the back is
Mm,
plastic. We can't avoid
mm,
that. But that top
mm.
coating, you really want to make sure. I mean, transparency is king when it comes
Yeah,
to any kind of period related product, right?
exactly. And oftentimes they don't write what the ingredients are, and there's not enough regulation on that as well. So that's definitely something that needs to happen. Uh, at the same time, we also have the environmental impact of period products, and we know that 2 billion pads and tampons are flushed down the toilet each year over here in the UK, and it's one of the most common types of trash found on European beaches as well, after cigarettes and plastic bottles and food wrappers. And when I'm looking at the femtech space, there are definitely a few exciting developments. There are companies that are creating reusable period products. There are companies that are using completely new materials like seaweed for period
Yeah.
products. And
Wow.
yeah,
And are they on the market now?
the one I'm thinking of, I think, is not on the market yet. I'd have to double check. But there
That's
are
okay.
products on the market that are flushable, biodegradable, and compostable. And I think all of those are hugely fascinating. And those are the most exciting products to me, even more so than reusable ones, because I think from an innovation and business perspective, it's always important to look at how people behave right now. And something like three-quarters of the period market consists of disposable period products. So, if people prefer disposable over usable products, how can we make those disposable products as good as possible? And I think flushable, biodegradable, compostable is ideal.
Yeah.
And I do think we have an opportunity to create better standards, to set better standards for menstrual companies right now. And the FemTech movement, what's so exciting about the FemTech movement is that 80% of FemTech founders are women, which is very
Awesome.
unusual for any industry, especially any tech industry, right? And so many of these companies are creating period products made of new materials or period products that are biodegradable. And so hopefully companies that put a lot of thought into things like that are both better for the planet and better for female bodies. Um, and again, if you have skin in the game, so if you are running a period product company, you're planning to use these period products yourself, no woman would willingly choose to use a dodgy tampon or create something that's going to kill sea turtles, right? So
Yeah.
We have.
Yeah, a woman-led business would be far more likely to look at the balance sheet and make sure the P&L works for the product, but also can we just please make sure we're not killing women or the planet with this product? And they would be far more likely to design for avoiding both of those things.
That's the hope, because
Mm,
we do have skin in the game, quite literally.
yeah. If you're an Aussie listening and local made, local owned is a priority for you, I want you to meet the beautiful brand Pure Earth. Gabriella and her team are so passionate about minimizing plastic, the power of natural ingredients and what they can do for the health of our skin, the health of our hair. And I especially love the amazing Kakadu Plum Vitamin C Serum, which is 99% Kakadu plum. That's it. The rest is a small amount of natural preservatives. So if you haven't checked out their hair, body care and face products, head to pureearth.com.au, 20% off for the month of July, code LOTOXLIFE. Gosh, I have so many questions. Okay, I want to ask about contraception because that's another big one. And I really find it fascinating that whenever they've trialed male contraceptive pills, they've pulled
Mm,
them straight away because of the side effects. And yet we
mm.
now know. I've done so many shows with incredible doctors on the deficiencies that you form with long-term pill use, on how long it takes to, you know, rehabilitate your gut microbiome. We know that there are depression links. I'm sure you researched even more negative side effects of the pill. But where are we at innovating in the contraceptive space?
Yeah, so women try an average of 3 to 4 different contraceptive methods in our lifetime.
Hmm.
And for only, no, hang on. Let me look up the statistic here. So for 91% of us, there's no contraceptive method that has all the features we find extremely important, according to the Guttmacher
Wow.
Institute.
Okay, so for over half of the world's population, I don't know how much that percentage is therefore then physically, sexually active. But what we're saying is like over 90% of us are like, yeah, let's just try and get the most amount of boxes to tick
Mm-hmm.
because there's nothing that does it all.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And in the US, excuse me, in the US, 3/4 of couples rely on women for long-term contraception, right? So the contraceptive burden,
75%. Yeah,
yeah,
wow.
has always been on women. And so
Mm.
to make contraception a more equitable affair, we need better male contraception as well.
Mm.
But as you've said, trials for the male pill were stopped because men had experienced side effects, the same kinds of side effects that women are expected to put up with.
Mm.
And so I write about an innovative company in the book that's called Contraline, and they've created a reversible vasectomy for men.
Woohoo.
Yeah, which
We love
could,
that.
yeah, yeah. And it's a really young founder who's running the company, and he's raised a lot of money, and they are in clinical trials. And I think there is a huge need and there's a lot of demand for it. So I think we'll see more of these options coming to the market soon.
Mm.
I also think
Can
there's, yeah, go
Can
on.
I just interject because I happened to see something just yesterday on Instagram from an account I follow that reports on women's health topics quite often. And someone in their community, their husband had gone for a vasectomy. He's in the waiting room. There's a brochure that says literally, have you thought about your wife having her tubes tied instead? And like, and there were a couple of other things. Have you thought about? So it was basically, have you thought about your wife shouldering the burden of contraception instead in the waiting room, waiting for the vasectomy? And
How does that make
I,
any sense? Because surely
it
many
makes no
then get up and
sense.
walk out.
Well, they're not going. Well, hopefully, and we're literally saying to the guys showing up and trying to be
Yeah.
part of the solution and the parity.
Mm.
You don't have to be though. Have you thought about this? And getting your tubes tied is a super invasive surgery
Mm.
compared to a vasectomy.
Yeah.
No?
Yes, I think compared to a reversible vasectomy,
Mm.
for sure, because this company, Contraline, they're working with a hydrogel, and that could either be taken out after 2 years or it would just disintegrate on its own. And they're focusing on young men, who
Mm.
wouldn't want to have a full stop kind of vasectomy.
Yeah.
So I think that is definitely a lot less invasive, and they use pain relief as well
Mm-hmm.
when that's being used.
Yeah.
So that was
Gosh, that
right
makes me
away
think
added to.
of,
Yeah,
of
exactly.
course it was.
Yeah,
Unlike getting an IUD inserted.
exactly. Yes,
Hmm.
that's exactly it. And I
Wow.
think, there was a medical device called Esher a while ago where a metal coil was inserted into the fallopian tubes to cause an inflammation, and it caused serious medical issues, and it was a big medical scandal. So that was clearly something that was very invasive, very dangerous, and it went wrong.
Mm-hmm. My goodness. Okay, so reversible vasectomies are soon to be much more widely available.
I sure hope so.
Mm-hmm. It's
And
happening though. We're studying
yes,
it. We're trying it.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
yeah, it is being trialed.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have a hormone injections are being trialed and sprays. So there are various, hormonal and non-hormonal contraceptive options that are being trialed on men right now. So I think we will see many more of these products coming to the market in the next decade or so. And
Mm-hmm.
as you've said, there's much more awareness about the side effects of the contraceptive pill now.
Yeah.
Um, it is still the go-to recommendation.
Mm. Well, not
Um,
even just for contraception, but for
yep,
so many,
for many
let's
other.
just whack the pill on this problem instead of really trying to unpack it. And I am
Yes.
all for SOS. Literally nothing else is working and I need something now. Quality of life's being affected. We should never be shaming anyone for choosing any medication that helps
Yep.
them in the moment they're in their lives. But at the same time, when we're so woefully behind on researching women's health more
Mm.
broadly for things like PCOS,
Yep.
period pain, endometriosis linked period pain, endometrial inflammation, and all of the issues that can then link into with
Mm.
IBS and a whole host of other things. Like, come on,
Yeah. And for
sure,
some,
that has
yeah.
worked till now, but like
Mm.
we've got to keep researching what could be better and reduce
Exactly.
the amount of side effects.
Yeah, absolutely. And for some people, the pill works really well and it's perfectly fine. But I think there are just many unknowns,
Mm.
and there's no academic consensus on some of these side effects, like the link to depression, the link to suicide. Um, I think in 10 or 20 years' time, we will know much more about the pill, and the way we think about it will change radically.
Bring it on, I say. Home. If a healthy home is your priority right now, then Oz Climate, our major podcast partner, without whom we could not put this show on every week, has got you covered with 10% off for Aussies. Code LowToxLife. Dehumidifying is a particular passion of mine because it helps us prevent moisture, excess humidity, and of course, therefore, mold in our indoor environments. Of course, if you ever have a leak or a flood, contact a mold technician or a building biologist. But for everyday living, you would be surprised the impact that good dehumidification can make in your indoor environment. I've done a ton of reels on this to help you know how long, what size of unit, how many units, different floor plans. Everything's there on my Instagram at Low Tox Life, and you'll see all the white background tiles are part of a humidity literacy series. I hope it helps you. Head to ozclimate.com.au. They have heating and cooling solutions, amazing dehumidifiers, and their Winix air purifier range. Now, I want to come back though to something that we talked about much earlier, which kind of links to contraception, which was period trackers that you briefly mentioned right at the start. And I think these are interesting. I wear an Oura ring. I love my Oura ring. I have never known myself as well as tuning in and going, oh, yep, look, the temperature went up and that tracks with how I'm feeling today. It's just been an incredible tool for me personally as I've navigated midlife where things get a little bit more unstable and wonky as well. But I do worry about that data aspect. And I do, you
Yes.
see this rise in surveillance data and government linked surveillance data. And, it definitely raises some red flags for me. And I'm sure for many people, you have what's the super famous period tracker called? It's escaped my
Flow
mind now.
health,
Yeah, there's Flow Health. There are a couple of others.
natural cycles.
Natural Cycles, that's the one.
Yep.
How transparent are these big data companies or big tracking companies with how that data is used for the women that subscribe to them?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And the first thing to say is that there are so many period apps on the market right now, over
So
300 of
many.
them. And it's always worth looking at, who they're produced by, because there are some companies that put a lot of thought into data privacy and how to protect their users. And then there are some companies that just put out loads of different kinds of apps, gaming companies, utility companies that have simply created a period app because they realized, oh, okay, people seem to be using this product. So it's always worth looking into the company behind your period app. And I also say to people, you can Google the name of the app and then another key term like scandal, data leak,
Oh, I love that tip. Yeah. I love a
lawsuit.
good
Yeah,
long form Google research
yeah,
term,
yeah,
full sentence is
yes.
always a really great way to see if there's any
Yeah,
dirt out there.
exactly. Because just a few minutes of research, can make a difference in this case. And things keep changing as well. So, according to the academic research that I've seen, the period app Clue tends to do really well. And I know that they've put a lot of thought into their data privacy. They're based in Berlin, which means they're regulated by GDPR, which is one of the strictest privacy regulations in the world.
Hmm.
There are also some privacy first trackers. One of them is called Drip. Then there's a period app created by UNICEF specifically for young girls that's called Oki.
Hmm.
So there are apps that are privacy first, and there are companies that put a lot of thought into it. Having said that, Flow Health is the period app with the largest number of users. They've also raised by far the most money in the
Mm.
space, and they are facing a jury trial soon. And they've also settled another case previously.
And that
So,
was to do with what
with
exactly?
selling user data to third parties, including Meta.
Oof.
Yeah. So those, those
Okay.
trials are ongoing.
And
But
this is what
that's,
women are worried about, right? Like
mhm.
there it is. So yeah.
Yeah. I
Okay.
think what women are worried about in the US is, slightly different after the overturn of Roe v. Wade. And the fear there is that states that criminalize abortion could subpoena tech companies to then gain access to
Mm.
people's period data to try and figure out if somebody had an abortion. So I think the concerns people have around their period apps will really depend on the politics of where you live and also how you balance privacy and convenience, right? And
Mm.
overall, I think period app data is not the most revealing kind of data.
Mm.
you know, because on an app, oftentimes there's missing data and it's very easy to enter false data into a period app.
Yeah.
Whereas GPS data, purchasing history, emails, browser history, those things can be more revealing than the data on a period app.
Fair enough. But yeah, I do have a huge concern for people who might live in more restricted areas around that abortion piece. And imagine someone with PCOS where you just have some crazy fluctuation or you don't get a period for 2 months and it's actually very normal for you, and then someone trying
Mm.
to construe that as obviously something happened there, for
Yeah,
you to
I
not
think
get a
it's,
period.
yeah, from what
Oof.
I've seen, it's very unlikely. There's some research done by the Electronic Frontiers Foundation, and they said the most common scenario for those who get prosecuted for having an abortion is when a family member, partner, or hospital staff turns them into law enforcement, and the evidence that's used to build a case includes things like messages and emails.
Okay.
So I think period app data is, less revealing than any of these other things.
Okay. It's nice to put it into perspective. I
Mm,
appreciate you
mm.
taking the time to do that for us. Um,
Well, it was something I really wanted to know, right? It
mm,
is a big concern. And when Roe v. Wade was overturned, everybody on Twitter, as it was called
yeah.
back then, was saying, delete your period app. So I wanted to figure out, is that really something we need to do?
Yeah, do we have to do it? Yeah. Um, Look, I don't want the overtone of our conversation to be like all about the gaps and the hindrances and poor women still up against it, even though we are, and it's very important to give the lay of the land. Like, things still suck in a number of areas, and for anyone who can step up, start a business. If you're someone who's really well connected and you know you can get some funding and you know you can do something in this space, like, do it. Can you share, Marina, some stories, even just a couple that come to mind that you've shared in the book, that really beautifully show how we are, in a lot of ways, moving in the right direction?
Yes. That was the whole, purpose of the book was to
I
say,
know. And that's
look,
why I want to finish with this, because
yes,
I don't want people thinking the book is a sub
yes.
story, because it is just not.
Yes, I
So
think
go
the
for it.
first 10 or 20% of the book is about the issues and the problems, and then the rest focuses on solutions and the stories of people who innovate in this space. But oftentimes you need to point out what the gaps are,
Yeah.
so that, we are aware of what needs to be done. And I think seeing how many things suck also illustrates how big of an opportunity this is for everyone,
Yes.
for
More
businesses,
than
for
half
non,
the
yeah, for
population.
nonprofits, for governments,
Yeah.
for investors, for absolutely everybody. So, whether you're an angel investor or maybe you're a student, you could focus your thesis on this topic. If you're a researcher, you could think about how to include women in your research, how to analyze your data by sex. There's something almost everybody can do to
Mm.
advance this area. And I think
Okay.
that's what's really inspiring. And in the book, I've interviewed entrepreneurs, investors, researchers, because I think it has to be a concerted effort. It can't just be about innovative products, but we have to do the research in order to be able to innovate. We have to fund these things in order to be able to innovate. So I think what the FemTech movement has done so well, and what I'm hoping to do with this book, is to bring people together to
Mm.
advance women's health.
Can I ask if you found it hard to get the book title, The Vagina Business, across the line?
Yes.
I
Of
can't
course.
imagine you just having a chat with the publisher and saying, and by the way, I want to call it The Vagina Business. Like,
Yes.
what did their face do when you said that?
Yes, absolutely. So when I thought of the idea for this book, it immediately arrived with the title. So in my mind, it was the Vagina Business from the start. And my literary agent really loved the title from the start. So she always had my back. And then when we went out to talk to different publishers who were interested in the book, pretty much every person we spoke to said, this is a brilliant book, but you'll have to change the title because, as we've said, vagina is or can be too much for some people. And I kept explaining, well, the whole purpose is to destigmatize the conversation, to normalize the word in a business setting. And then we sold the book to the biggest women-owned publishing house in the world, and I thought everything was solved. But as it was getting closer to the deadline, my editor got back to me and she said, well, we've had feedback from bookstores and they're saying they may not display the book, they may not promote the book because of the title. So can you please come up with 16 alternative titles?
16, no
Yes.
less. Wow, okay. And did you manage to get 16 done?
Yes, I did. I called two of my best friends. We came up with some titles. I didn't really like any of the alternative titles because I always felt that the true name, the actual name of the book is The Vagina Business. And then the publisher tested all of those titles on our target audience. And guess which title won?
This one?
Yes, The Vagina Business.
Oh my gosh, so good.
Yeah.
So you just came straight back to square one and green light?
Green light, yes. But it keeps coming up as a challenge. You know, I had some other authors refuse to write me an endorsement because of the title, and a venue refused to host my book launch, and so on. So it continues to be an issue. And as you've said, even in places where everyone's really on board with advancing women's health and where everyone's really progressive, people are still taken aback by the word. So I was an MC at South by Southwest. They had the first ever conference here in London a few weeks ago. And, you know, it's a really innovative conference with music and movies and so on. Very forward thinking. And I was MCing the health tech track. And when I introduced myself, and this always happens, when I introduced myself and I said, and I'm the author of The Vagina Business, people giggle. There are always some people in the audience who giggle. That's just a reaction I'm used to now. And then, you know, I catch them and I point it out. And then after you've said vagina on a stage a couple of times, people get used to it. And it's actually quite easy to then win people over. And I
we literally need to flood the internet and every stage with the word vagina. It's a desensitization exercise. Just make it normal. Make it normal.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it is something that people find very energizing too. I get lots of messages from readers saying, you know, I noticed your book because of the title. And
yeah, I can imagine.
And now I read it on my commute to work. I read it on the train to see people's reaction or to start conversations. I read it on the beach. I took it with me on the plane. That's something I hear quite often, is that people read it in public on purpose.
Ooh, I love that. It's like it's stealth, but not so stealth advocacy work, really in motion, isn't it? En masse.
Exactly. Because then people see you reading that book in public and people, you know, notice, and oftentimes you can strike up a conversation or you can just observe what's going on. So that's something I found very fascinating. There's one woman who told me, your book is my weapon, which I thought was an amazing way of putting it. Yeah.
Well, I think just a lot of women are angry now. We're just frustrated and angry often that we have to worry about like the 5 things you need to do to be safe at night, the 5 symptoms you have to watch for if you did it. Like we're all trying to support each other through online communities and support groups and practitioners who are pioneering and hearing our concerns and not gaslighting us. But it's a slog. It's a constant push uphill still for women. And so I think it's brilliant that you've written this book. I hope it won't be censored on YouTube where we publish this, or on our socials on Meta, because there's a lot of awful stuff being published on those platforms that isn't being censored, and this for me is the opposite of awful. It's what absolutely needs to happen. So I'm thrilled that you've written it, Marina. Good on you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's really good to know that change is happening, and there are many people who are creating, completely new products, services, and research products. And something that surprised me when I was doing this research, when I was writing this book, is just how much I've learned about my own body. Not just about technology, but just about female bodies in general. And that's something I hear from readers too, is, I've learned so much from reading this book. And one thing, and it's such an interesting way of phrasing things, one thing women often say is, I'm embarrassed by how much I've learned by reading your book.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Isn't it? Because as women, I think we're always embarrassed, whether we knew something or we didn't know something, or we've done something, we haven't done something. And I think it's okay to learn things. It's good to learn new things, and there's no need to be embarrassed by it. I'm happy to say I've learned a lot by writing this book.
Did your birth journey change in the fact that you were researching this book while you were pregnant and having a child?
Oh yes, absolutely. And I've continued. I've done much more research than what I've put into this book subsequently as well. Well, that's a story for another time.
Story for another time. Part two.
Yes.
Well, I think what's really come out for me as well is that it's not necessarily about technology to then have us distance ourselves further from our natural state. But technology can also play a part in us getting to know our bodies better. It can play a part in preventative medicine in a really proactive way. And it can actually support the natural order of things as well, through both the pairing of technology with research in particular. So I just think you've done an incredible job to string all of these incredible threads, stories, and innovative ideas and research happening together. And it's been such a joy to have you on the show. I hope the book flies around the world.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And it's been so much fun talking to you.
Thank you for joining us in listening to this week's show. If you're not already subscribed or following the show on whatever platform you listened, please do that now. It helps enormously in terms of getting this show out to more people. Another way you can connect and support the work we do so that we can support you in your low tox life is join us in the Low Tox Club. You'll get access to amazing member masterclasses where we invite some of our best show guests for a live Q&A with members. You also have great shopping discounts from low tox businesses and, honestly, the nicest low tox community Facebook group that exists on the internet. I do hope you join us there. It costs just the price of a coffee a month on average. Head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the Explore tab, and Low Tox Club is the first option there. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.